Hello everyone, this is SpeakingOnFlicks here. I'm going to do a pretty long intro right now, and if you guys do not care about what I have to say, then I recommend you skip to the actual reviewing. If you read the title, we're obviously talking about the 5 original Frankenstein films. I'll be talking about them and reviewing them and saying what I like or didn't like about them. So let's get into the things I have to say. First of all, this channel will have spoilers on them, so I'm sorry about that, but that's how you review a flick, so that's how I'll be doing it. I'm reading my review straight from LetterBoxd. If you guys want to know my LetterBoxd, I will be putting it down in the description. And feel free to put your LetterBoxd down there too, because I'll probably follow you. This channel is for myself and it's for fun. I do it just to satisfy myself and surprise myself. And if people like it, then that'd be awesome. I won't really be consistent either. I'm not going to force myself to do these videos if I don't want to, but who knows, maybe something will happen in the future. This obviously is a new channel, and to speak on channels, my old channel, which was an NFL channel, I kind of forced myself into it, and a lot of things went wrong. I was self-promoting, and it wasn't a nice view. It was kind of cheap, and if someone who I did that to is here, I'm not sure how you took it, but you know, it was a quest, that's for sure. So I'm gonna be changing things up this time, and I'm gonna be doing it for myself. I'm not going to be shoving it into anyone's face, so I say that respectfully. And yeah, so let's get into the video. And to anyone who's going to be supporting this channel, thank you very much. I'm sorry for this long intro, but here we go. Okay everyone, first and foremost, let's start with 1931's Frankenstein. James Whale is the director. It's a horror classic, and it deserves all the respect it can gather up nowadays. It starts with a very impressive shot and then ends in one of those, wait, that's the end kind of shots. But you know what? We see that a lot back then, so I'm not surprised there. For a 1931 flick that's very ahead of its time, execution-wise, that's quite alright. Either way, Frankenstein was definitely my thing, and there are a few entirely unforgettable moments. With the iconic shots, lines, antagonists, and then the sadly overlooked protagonist who delivers a nice performance, this one has it all. There's a fully formed screenplay, and the way its story is told is never irritating or off balance. The direction by Wells is great, and he seems to have had the universal monster movement in his hands with this film, and The Invisible Man in Frankenstein's sequel, of course. It's a film with a compelling message and a brilliant emotional layer. The monster, the seemingly heartless antagonist, then becomes the character we mourn over by the end. It's fairly touching, and I'll let the father carrying his dead daughter scene, the burning building at the end shot, and then a nice montage of angry citizens hunting down the monster towards the end speak for me when I say that. It's got a nice science fiction tone, and I like the way this was thrown onto our characters. Honestly, I could definitely come back for a rewatch, and it's extremely memorable. Frankenstein follows the story of a mad scientist who is desperately dedicated to create a living man from the dead corpses he gathers up as an experiment to change the world of science. As we all know, it doesn't go too smooth, and the man he creates goes on a bloodthirsty rampage. I'll start with some obvious pros. First of all, Frankenstein visually is pretty beautiful. It's written well, and the acting is pretty good for the time next to other entries notably. There's a nice setup and a fantastic ending. The camera work is noticeably greater compared to other films of the time. It's consistent, intact, and the atmosphere is effortlessly perfect. Sure, it could have excelled in other areas, but wow, this was such an accomplishment for the time. I can only imagine a theater full of innocent 1930s teens, young kids, possibly adults, and elders running out scared out of their minds. Epic film. I guess I'd have to give Frankenstein a 4-star review and a B+ in my own ranking. Alright guys, next up, The Bride of Frankenstein. So basically, this is another James Whale film. It is a film that truly surprised me, and my expectations were fairly high to begin with. It's definitely Universal Monster Movies' masterpiece right here. This will stand as my favorite 1930s film, or at least one of them, and it's my favorite old school monster movie. The Bride of Frankenstein is an innovative, creative, fearless, and absolutely brilliant film that's so noticeably ahead of its time. It stood out back then, and it stands out today. It's simply better, extraordinarily better compared to the other monster films. In my opinion, I found this to be the most consistent, visually pleasing, and entertaining monster film. Whale's work is awesome here, and there's never a genuinely weak segment of the film. I'm actually surprised this isn't praised as much as it should be nowadays too. Funny enough, despite the fact it's better, the film is something of a dark comedy, and it doesn't take itself as seriously as the first Frankenstein. It's literally the best kind of cheesy to the point where it feels borderline thought-provoking. It features some touching scenes, and pretty much all of the creative ideas showcased are satisfying. It's bigger in scale and it shows. The themes are laid back, and even if it could be classified as possibly darker and more brutal next to the original, it's not as scary. Also, I always thought, how could this be called The Bride when she only appears in the last 5 minutes of the film? This is very rewatchable and it's very memorable. The Bride of Frankenstein continues the story of the heartless beast, except this time he's humanized, yet he still manages to be heartless. His creator is forced into coming back into his previous profession, and the monster is on the run from the townspeople who want him executed for his crimes. Let me say that this is one of the best sequels of all time, and it's definitely better than the first. Also, I'll praise that odd but pretty delightful opening scene where Frankenstein's writer is depicted as the character telling the story or the film we are all about to watch. It's pretty good breaking the fourth wall right there, honestly. Odd choice, but a good one. From there, it's just a collage of incoming unforgettableness. It's actually really funny, and I'm sure that was the approach. It's touching when it has to be, and it's brutal when it has to be. It's well edited, especially during the end when the awesome second experiment is executed. Some things that also stand out would be the music, the fact that the sequel explores the monster's humanity, the sets, the costumes, and the simplicity that really lets the film just be really smooth and engaging. Just an all-around classic here, and I absolutely love the experience. There's more to say, but I'll just leave it as check this film out. Personally, I could call Bride of Frankenstein another 4, but a very high one, and it's yet another B+. Alright everyone, the third entry, now we have Son of Frankenstein. Roland V. Lee's Son of Frankenstein is a pretty wacky film, but I liked it. Just like most of the third entries today, 1939's Son of Frankenstein kind of brings back the magic, but that magic is simply one-dimensional money grabbing and too simplistic to compel. I'm not complaining, as these films usually always focus on entertaining an audience more than anything else. The monster literally blew up last film, but now he's back in some random dude's possession. At least we get to see both Karloff and Lugosi together, and they're pretty fun. Overall, I don't have too big of a problem with this film. It's messy, sure, and it develops some of its characters in such a way where trying to grasp certain situations becomes too complicated, but it doesn't make a bad movie. Son of Frankenstein, to be fair, features an alright direction. Roland V. Lee doesn't offer anything too impressive, and it has some weak links. On the other hand, it doesn't become ultra cheesy and avoids any potential harm to the experience by the end. It takes itself seriously, even in its wackiest moments, but I guess that helps it in a way or two. Personally, I don't really have much else to break down. I wouldn't revisit, and it's memorable for what it is. Son of Frankenstein continues the story of the monster and the Frankenstein family. The creator of the monster is now dead, and his son will now inherit his mansion. All is fine until his son is determined to follow his father's footsteps. What a surprise. He'll only accomplish his goals with the help of the mysterious broken-necked madman. So obviously some new characters will enter the Frankenstein storyline, come across the monster, bring him back, and then he'll go and terrorize the town again. I like the inspector, and Mel Brooks in Young Frankenstein did a very great job on spoofing his character in particular. Now we have a family man as a protagonist in Son of Frankenstein, and it feels pretty fresh. The little boy in this film is kind of funny too, so I think that it's one of the highlights, honestly. As always, the sets and cinematography is far too impressive given the fact that this film as a whole doesn't require such a beautiful, scary, and pretty grotesque atmosphere. I was always into the story, and I guess it never bores. On the other hand, some of the handling of the characters' development and behavior seems rather off or odd. You gotta turn the brain off to get to a plot sometimes. But anyways, the motives are just violently questionable, but oh well. As for an obvious flaw, Son of Frankenstein has some plot issues and doesn't serve as a strong sequel for many reasons. It chooses conflict over storytelling, but it's 39, and we haven't reached the unbelievably lazy sequel era yet. This at least feels kind of inspired, and I will say though, the monster's fate in this film is absolutely epic. Personally, I would have to give this film 3 stars out of 5, and I guess I can call it a C-. Alright guys, now we have 1942's The Ghost of Frankenstein. Earl C. Kenton is the director, and it's easily the worst of the franchise. It's almost a consistent mess, in fact. But The Ghost of Frankenstein, the odd one out and the weakest of the franchise once again, is truly the first poor entry. It's lazy and nearly impossible to understand. Thanks to the fact it isn't totally incompetent, it's still kind of fun, but so many scenes are just boggling. Kenton's direction isn't the worst element, and I think I'll give that to the writing. It's a lazy sequel where flashbacks to the original play for the sake of giving us a callback. Why? I don't know, but it's never a good look when it lacks a meaning. A money grab, maybe a tad uninspired, and most importantly, just really uninspired, I guess. I mean, they killed him with a rope swing in the last film, and now they're just killing him in fire again. And there really just isn't enough to this plot to make me love it. This is by far the dumbest one too, and if you thought I'd scroll over the themes of the film like I usually do, I have nothing to say. It's just scares and shadowy figures I wouldn't revisit, and this is sadly forgettable. The Ghost of Frankenstein continues the story of the monster's quest for domination. His new ally, who was in the last film, who apparently frickin' died to gunshot wounds, is back, and now he's conducting the evil force. Now forced into giving the monster and his new ally shelter, it's up to Frankenstein's second son, who just appears out of nowhere, to outsmart the villains. He'll have to complete a brain transplant in the process. Okay, so basically we have Frankenstein's daughter. She is super underdeveloped, and when the plot is ultimately in her hands, the writing seems to fail tremendously. No disrespect to the actress, because her performance isn't bad at all. It's just a failure to move it along smooth within her scenes. As a quick example, her father dies in the fire at the end, and she, along with her lover, walks happily, holding hands, and she's like relieved. I don't know why, but it's kind of odd. The monster is in her home the entire time, and she only asks about him once, and she's afraid of him. I don't know why. But anyways, maybe question your father's sanity or run away, but you know, when investigating her family's past, she comes across the journal. Over the writing in the journal, there's a flashback that basically just goes over everything in the last film. I mean, not last film, the original one. And it's pretty wacky, honestly, and lazy. So I guess that sums up how occasionally dumb and lazy these films are. On the other hand, The Ghost of Frankenstein is visually pleasing, even if it stands less impressive next to the others. It's short, simple, and worth your time if you're a fan. I personally recommend to only the hardcore fans. As this one stands as the weakest, I'd have to give it 2.5 out of 5, and it's a D+. Alright, now we have 1944's The House of Frankenstein, or just House of Frankenstein. This is easily the best dumb fun I've ever had in my life, in recent memory at least. I'm not lying there also. Earl C. Kenton is the director again, and he delivers a pretty charming and action-packed, crowd-pleasing, and entertaining film here. It's obviously flawed, and it seems to forget about how to really feature a compelling story, but it's too fun to ignore. This one, even if I can't call it too great, is a film I actually enjoyed. It's like one of those spin-offs nowadays, except this is aimed towards monster nerds, and to them I'm pretty sure this is cinematic heaven. I personally feel like this film should be watched by some of the viewers who appreciate and respect films like The Wolfman, Frankenstein, and Dracula. The direction is much more aware of how an audience will interpret a piece of entertainment, so it comes off as watchable and humorous. It's not quite a comedy, but it's silly, and the film knows it. It's still creative, and there are a few really cool scenes. House of Frankenstein isn't particularly meaningful, and it clearly throws in a wacky story, which isn't poor or anything, to be honest. As an excuse to introduce 3 of the monsters in one movie. With Karloff and Chaney playing lead or supporting roles, it's more of a reunite film than anything. There's a romance and a drama, but it doesn't go anywhere. It's like an action film too, especially during the end of the film and the end of the first act. To be honest, if I had the chance to revisit in the future, I would. It's delightful enough to remember for a while too. House of Frankenstein is the final entry, and it's basically just about the monster's journey. 2 cold-hearted crooks break out of prison and embark on an adventure to follow the footsteps of legendary scientist Frankenstein. So basically they ran out of Frankenstein's sons to make the film about, so they just bring in 2 random guys. But you know, I have no complaints. On the way they run into a few cruel beasts. This is one of those you don't need to actually pay attention to understand kind of films, and personally I love those. I watched in a decently loud environment, and it didn't affect anything, and I remember the house was loud, but it's whatever, I liked it. House of Frankenstein is actually pretty respectable, and I don't understand how some could call it bad. Is it good or bad? Sometimes I don't even know, but it never failed to entertain, and it always felt inspired or decorated. Maybe there are other wackier sequels or spin-offs, but yeah. This was never poorly approached in an irritating way. The sets are pretty good, surprisingly, given the fact it's a 5th part of the franchise. It stands out visually, and it's engaging too. The effects are good for the time. I like the action, and the horror element, even if more humorous than anything, is filled with so much to enjoy. So yeah, it's definitely a winner, but it's not perfect. I was expecting something underwhelming, but I'm actually fulfilled. If I had to rate this film, I'd give it 3 stars out of 5 and a respectable C+. Alright guys, I'm sorry if I didn't sound enthusiastic, but trust me, you know, I'm kind of getting used to this camera stuff again, and as you can see here, I wrote down everything I needed to talk about. Is there anything embarrassing? Alright, whatever. Anyways, you know, I just wanted to make a video, and I'm not sure if anyone will watch, but I just want to make it for myself. I'm going to try really hard. to, you know, make these videos fun, and I will get better over time, and I know that for a fact. If I do more, then, you know, it'll be a process. But thank you to anyone who watched, and maybe I'll come back and do more, but either way, I had a fun time making this, and I love movies, and if anyone wants to recommend me to review one on here, like individually, I will easily do it. I don't really care what it is, honestly. I'll review pretty much anything. Sorry for having stupid intro and outro. I just want to make these as realistic and raw as possible. So hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next video.